Greetings. Well, in the last video I showed you how to drill small pipe chanters and also how to ream conical chanters. So this video is going to be about how to turn the outside of the chanters to actually complete the chanter. And I've been doing some looking at my records. I started making in 1983 and I've made 750 small pipe chanters and 232 Cornish chanters, which are also small pipe ones, and double things because they're double pipes, double the amount, but 232 and 483 conical chanters. Now during that time I've had a lot of help from other people who've given me tips and things, but I learned from experience and I've made an awful lot of mistakes on the way. So my idea is to pass some of my skills on to other people, so hopefully you don't have to make the same mistakes I made. This is the 9th chanter that I ever made, and it took me probably over a day to make, and took an awful lot of sandpaper to make it look as good as it does. I want to show you what I do to make chanters. It's an evolving process, so probably next year I will have developed other techniques as well, but anything that I can do to help you with your turning must be a benefit to you. So on we go. Let's have a look at the lathe to start with. Right, so this is my lathe. This is where it all happens. It's a Harrison Jubilee lathe. It's a really sturdy old lathe. It's older than me. I don't know how old it is, and it does everything I want it to do. John converted it to vary speed, which I find really, really helpful. The main alteration I've done to it, I've done various ones, is to raise it considerably. The original one is 10 inches lower, and it means you get back strain. I've done Alexander technique and I know about you don't want to be bending your back. I raised it 6 inches, even that wasn't enough. It's 10 inches now. The received wisdom, which I've read in books and I think is rubbish, is that the centers should be your elbow height. It's way above that, so there's very comfortable being able to move side and side, side to side there. It's stacked underneath with 32 pounds worth of pre-decimal pennies and halfpennies and some bricks as well, so it's really, really solid. It doesn't vibrate at all. That is an advantage for turning, but for videoing it does create a problem because we can't move it out into the room so the cameraman can get round there, but Uli will manage one way or other and we'll do our best we can. Right, well, the most basic way of turning is using one of these in there, some kind of center. This is a great center because it actually has a removable plug and you can put different centers in to center onto the hole. There are all sorts of different types available for that. I started using my own collet chucks which screw on there. It was I got my friend Tony to make me a tap for the right size for the lathe, so I can actually screw that direct on. The collet itself, you just drill a hole there, cut through sideways, and then have a Jubilee clip there, and you must always remember to cover the Jubilee clip with something, otherwise you're going to remove your knuckles. This I find enormously helpful, and then later, much later, I bought the real thing, and this is wonderful collet chuck that has all sorts of different sizes of holes, and that holds things so firmly and so easily. Axminster Power Tools does them. Also, another way of holding wood is a trick that John Swain taught me. There again, you tap out the required size and then goes directly on, and I've got dozens of different mandrels for different sized holes. And also faceplate chuck, which you're going to see me operate quite quickly, a screw chuck. And I have the, I probably use this more than anything else, which is a 4-jaw self-centering chuck, which I always operate with a homemade cover on it, so that you're not going to remove any of your knuckles. Right, well, it's been interesting. I've been sorting out the tools that I mostly use for turning, and each one has its own individual handle, very recognizable, so I know what's on the other end of each one, and they have a place on the rack there. This is the roughing gouge, and even if it's called roughing gouge, you can do really, really fine work with this, and also really rough turning squares into circles very quickly with that. This, I think, is a bowl turning gouge. I use it only for one operation, which you'll see me do shortly after this. I'm not quite sure how to sharpen this. Maybe you have better ideas of how to do, how to use it. So I'd be interested to hear. Spindle gouge. I have two spindle gouges, and I use a lot of that for fine, a lot of this for fine work. This is, I think, called a beading tool. I don't use it for beading. I use it more for parting and for smoothing, cutting the ends of billets of wood. And I've just been experimenting recently with having one at an angle, and that's really handy in some difficult to get sort of areas, having it just angled so you can get in there. This is an old dining knife, I think, a Sheffield. It says Sheffield on it, which I converted, and that's great for parting wood. And you don't use, well, it only uses about 1 millimeter thick of wood. Now this is the big one. This is the skew chisel. It took me about 10 years to dare to learn this, because if you get your angles right, you can get such a smooth, polished finish with it, and if you just tip slightly in the wrong way, you wreck the whole thing. Now I've got various different ones of this, and the jury's still out about it. There's a guy called Alan Lathe who has some wonderful videos on YouTube. You should watch them. And with something much bigger than that, he actually turns these teeny little spinning tops on that. It's well worth watching that. And he has interesting ways of how to sharpen it. In fact, YouTube is absolutely full of different videos that you can learn a lot more from. I'll show you some the ways I sharpen tools, but do have a look at YouTube for other ways. And finally, the one that I use is a scraper, which doesn't really cut it, well, as it says, it scrapes, and it has a slight burr on the end of that. And let's see, yeah. So I use that on the bells of my pipes. Right, let's show you how I sharpen some of these. Right, sharpening. Well, early on I was sharpening my tools by hand on a high-speed grind wheel, and was quite alarmed by how much steel you lost, and also by how inaccurate my sharpening was. And sometimes I got it right, and then weeks went by, and then I tried again and it didn't work. I only use high-speed steel chisels, and there's no need to lose much steel at all on it if you use something accurate. I wanted to turn my sharpening, make it less of an art and more of a process. So I invested in a Tormek whetstone. They were very expensive. I've upgraded now. I've got a diamond stone there, and they come with a lot of pretty expensive attachments, and I don't regret buying it at all. I now can sharpen taking a fraction of a thousandth of an inch in seconds, and it's done. So sharpening is not a problem at all now. So it has this diamond stone in water, this rubber stone, honing stone, it's not stone, rubber, which I don't use much, and a leather one, a leather strop, and that's what it is. And another thing that I always do is use a black felt tip pen. Whenever I'm sharpening any chisel or anything, scissors or anything, I always do a black felt tip pen so that you can see exactly where it's sharpening, whether it's at the right angle. Now you'll notice in pipe making in general, I don't like using numbers. So I don't like measurements that much. Obviously I do take measurements, but anything that can reduce the abstraction of a number, I do. So I've made this little gauge here so that I can tell exactly how far the chisel, there we go, I got that, should go. Now, having done that, having got that locked in, I put it on the stone, and without even switching it on, I just drag it up and down to see where it's cutting, and it's going to cut directly on that line, so it's spot on the right angle. Okay, and now we'd use the felt tip pen here, as always. Such a useful indicator of how the sharpening is going. Switch on and off we go. Right, so that's nice and sharp, and I know the end I do at sort of right angles to the side. This is a trick that I learned from Alan Lacer's video, because previously I used to do that, and you can do so much damage with the end if you're at all inaccurate. Okay, this is a leather strop. I don't use the rubber one so much, and you can put some kind of goo on that, and I use that just to find the final honing after it's been sharpened. It just polishes that edge. Lovely, beastly sharp that, great. Right, the next tool I'm going to show you is the roughing gouge, and I've blackened this as I always do. I've modified the lathe with this stand, which I made myself, which and this is on the other side of the Tormac grinder. I put that in there, otherwise I get water channeled all down to me. And all I have to do is make sure that both ends, both sides are touching this tool rest. And there we are, we've taken practically no steel off, and it's as sharp as anything. Okay, I'd like to say a bit about breathing and about dust extraction. I have a setup here whereby I can, all the machines there on this side of the workshop link up to a big vacuum cleaner, and I can from here switch on. That takes all the dust away. I don't use it much for shavings because that clogs up the bag quite a bit, but I do use it for mostly for dust. I also have this device up here, which with a flick of a switch takes all the air. It's continuously on once I've switched it on, and it sucks all the air through that filter that you can see. And the whirlies at the back would look fun, but they're also really helpful. So at a glance, when there's machinery and stuff on, I can see that I've got it switched on, so that this is continuously on. Dust extractor just when I'm sanding mostly. Okay, now's the time for action. I've got my turning jacket on, my smock, otherwise things go down my shirt and everything, and I'm going to do a bit of rough turning to start with. I quite often don't work with square billets of wood because I cleave my wood quite a lot, so it follows the grain, so you can see there's hardly a straight edge on this at all, and that's where the 4-jaw chuck comes in handy, because it holds it really steady on at least three of the sides. So I'm going to turn this with a roughing gouge. Turn up a bit faster than that. I'm going is stop and see how it's turning, and actually it's not turning there so much, so I'm going to alter the end slightly to take that into account. And now I'm going to center it at the other end. So the roughing gouge can do real rough work like this, or it can do very, very fine work if you have it sharp and you give it the opportunity to do that. So see how we're going on here. No, it needs recentering, and you can do that quite quickly. So now we've got a cylinder quite quickly, and just to show you the kind of smoothness you can get with this, you can use it like a skew chisel. Lovely smooth surface there. I wanted to talk a little bit about tool angles, because there, nearly all the cutting I was doing there. The beauty of the skew chisel actually is you can present all sorts of different angles to it. You can use, but with the turning tools, it's a real dance actually. You can move up and down, so that in the horizontal plane you can move up, but you can also move from side to side, and you can move up and down, and very often you're doing all three at once. And so actually, and very often you're doing all three at once. So actually, looking at the back of the tool, which I don't do when I'm turning, but while I'm turning, there's a lot of information there about what you're actually turning at the front, and I'll try and make that easier with some of the things I'm doing. But if you look, you see, I was turning that direction and that direction, but also altering the angle there, and also altering this. So keep in mind this. So to make it a bit easier, I think, and this is just an experiment, I've made a little arrow that will fit on this gouge, because you're going to see me doing quite a lot on that, and that points upwards there, and if I can use it, it may help you see making the bell, which is the next phase of what I'm doing.